That night, I went back to the dock, the same one they called illegal. The water was still, the moonlight soft. I thought about Clara. She would have told me to let it go. She always said, if you can turn anger into purpose, you win twice. So I didn't sue them. I didn't take $1. I dissolved the HOA and created a new plan. The Clara Thornton Memorial Conservation Fund. Every payment for water would go toward protecting the lake and giving scholarships to local students. It wasn't about owning the water anymore. It was about giving something back. I came here looking for quiet. What I found was something better. Peace that didn't come from isolation, but from standing my ground. And I did not sleep much after that first hall meeting. Even with Delilah in cuffs, I knew it was not over. Power does not step aside after one bad night. It looks for a new door. Maya called early. Her voice was calm, the way a surgeon sounds before the first cut. We need the paper trail, she said. If we show the full story, it will hold. If we miss pieces, they will say it is a fluke. I made coffee and opened the old box my uncle had left me. Receipts, folded maps, letters tied with twine. A photograph of him standing by the spring house, younger, taller than I remembered, smiling like the world was simple. There was a small notebook, too. His handwriting ran steady, like he never hurried. Keep the water clean. Keep the neighbors calm. Never sell the source. 3 short lines. A lifetime of choices. I placed the notebook in my jacket and drove into town. The county records building was plain brick. Inside, the clerk who had helped me before looked up over his glasses and smiled like he had been expecting me. Back for round 2? Yes, sir. I need copies of everything that mentions Pine Lake Springs. Old well permits, any easements, and anything with the name Pine Lake Estates. He nodded, rolled his chair to a metal cabinet, and pulled drawers that creaked like doors in an old barn. We stacked documents on a wooden table until the pile looked ridiculous. Then we began. It took hours. We read grant deeds from the territorial days. A survey from 1902 that traced the twin underground veins under my land. A letter from 1958 where a rancher upstream asked permission to run a small line for his cattle. My uncle had approved that one. I found a note in the margin in his hand. Only gravity feed. No pumps. Keep it fair. Then we hit the year Pine Lake Estates was built. The HOA filed a community water use statement, but the form was blank where the water right owner should sign. In that space was a stamped line, not applicable, community source. No signature from my uncle. No recorded easement. No purchase. Maya looked at it and closed her eyes for a second. That right there is the heart of it. We kept digging. I found a building permit for a pump station on HOA land. It listed a contractor I did not recognize. The contractor tied back to a small company with a nice name and a mailbox suite address. Maya circled it with her pen. Shell Company. Let's see who owns it. She searched public records on her laptop. The owner was not Delilah on paper. It was a cousin of her ex-husband in another county. 2 more clicks, and we saw 3 HOA maintenance contracts going to the same company. Landscaping, dock refurbishing, consulting, hundreds of thousands over a few years. Garrett walked in while we were still staring at the screen. You 2 look like you found the leak, he said. We found the pipe and the person who laid it, I said. He set a rolled survey on the table. This is the old spring house line. It runs under the cedars behind your shed. There's a small inspection cap 5 feet out from a north corner. If you unscrew it, you will hear the lake breathe. I laughed. Hear the lake breathe? You will know what I mean. We drove back to the cabin together. The air felt colder near the trees. Garrett was right. There was a rusted cap flush with the soil. He knelt, braced it with one hand, and turned. The metal squeaked. Then there it was. A steady hiss. Not loud. Not sharp. The sound of movement that did not ask permission. That is your flow, he said. Gravity. No power bill. Every drop the HOA has been taking starts right here. I felt a mix of pride and anger. Pride because my uncle had guarded something simple and good. Anger because people who never asked had built fortunes on it. We replaced the cap and stood. Garrett pointed toward the far shore where the big houses stood in a row. You should expect visits, he said. Word is moving fast. He was right. That evening 2 homeowners came by. A married couple in their 60s. They looked tired, not angry. We did not know, the woman said. We never asked. We just moved in. We paid our dues. I am sorry for what they did to your dock. That is not all of us. I invited them in. We sat at the small table. I showed them the deed, the survey, the stamped forms without signatures. The husband kept shaking his head. We trusted that board, he said. We thought they were strict for a reason. Now I see the reason was control. Not just control, the wife said. Money. She was right. The contracts told that story. The shell companies told that story. Bradley's phone call only confirmed the rod at the center. They thanked me for taking the time. Before they left, the woman put a hand on my arm. My brother is on the volunteer fire crew, she said. If you ever need help, call. She wrote a number on a slip of paper and pressed it into my palm like a promise. That night, I read my uncle's notebook again. Near the back, I found a page I had missed. Clara brought lunch to the spring house. Told me water remembers the hands that care for it. I told her that was nonsense. She laughed and said I would quote it one day. I closed the book and let the quiet sit. I could see Clara there in my mind again. Not just my wife. A person who believed in leaving places better than she found them. The next morning, Maya filed formal notices. One to the HOA board members still in place. One to the county. One to the State Water Resources Office. Each letter said the same clear thing. The springs under my land are the legal source for Pine Lake. No valid easement exists. Any further extraction without a written agreement will be considered trespass. Simple. Firm. No drama. An hour after the letters went out, my phone started lighting up. Unknown numbers. Short messages. A mix of outrage, fear, bargaining. You cannot shut off a whole community. Let's be reasonable. My mother's on oxygen. What happens to her if you play games with water? I replied to each the same way. I'm not shutting off the water. I am asking for fairness. We will build a legal agreement that protects the lake and the people who live here. Most never wrote back. A few said thank you. One called me names I had not heard since high school. By noon, a black SUV rolled into my drive. A man in a suit stepped out. He introduced himself as counsel for the interim HOA leadership. He held a thick envelope. We propose a settlement, he said. I opened it. The number on the first page was large. It came with one condition. I would transfer the water rights to the HOA permanently. I would also sign a non-disclosure agreement. I would never talk about any of it again. No, I said. He blinked. At least read the terms. I did. My answer is no. He looked past me at the lake and tried another angle. Think of the stress this avoids. Think of your time. Your peace. Avoids. Think of your time. Your peace. I thought of Clara. I thought of my uncle's 3 lines. Never sell the source. I am thinking of those things, I said. That is why the answer is no. He left without shaking my hand. I watched the SUV climb the hill. In the side mirror, I saw a second vehicle pull onto the shoulder up the road. Bradley. He lowered his window, stared, then drove off fast. He wanted me to know he was still around. That was fine. I wanted him to know I was not moving. Maya arrived with a plan that afternoon. She laid it out in steps, each one practical. First, we install flow meters where the spring line enters the HOA system. We document volumes. Second, we request a full audit of HOA finances for the last 5 years. As a supplier, you are entitled to know who is paying for what. Third, we meet with homeowners without the board present. They need to hear the facts, not fear. Fourth, we offer a legal water use agreement that is fair and simple. Cost plus maintenance. No profit. All surplus to the conservation fund. If they refuse, we take it to court and ask the judge for an injunction. But I think most people will say yes once they see the numbers. It sounded right. It sounded like something Clara would have endorsed. Garrett helped me place the meters. He dug with steady patience, talked little, and measured twice before he cut. When we connected the first meter, the needle swung and settled. The number climbed. Slow, constant, honest. Garrett jotted it down in a notebook. We will take readings at dawn and dusk for a week, he said. I will sign every page. Chain of custody. No one can say we guessed. At sunset, a patrol car stopped by. The deputy from the meeting stepped out. He looked less formal now. He rubbed the back of his neck like it had been a long day. Delilah was arraigned, he said. More charges may follow. We found some things in her office that do not look good. I wanted you to hear it from me. I appreciate that. He hesitated. You going to shut off their water? No, I said. I'm going to make sure it is used the right way. He nodded. That is what I hope you would say. That night, I walked the edge of the property with a flashlight and looked back at the houses across the water. Many were dark already. A few glowed in warm squares. Behind those windows were people who had nothing to do with contracts or shell companies. They woke up, paid bills, checked on grandkids, worried about the price of gas. They just wanted a quiet place to live. I wanted that too. The first homeowner meeting happened 2 days later. We held it at the town library, not at the HOA hall. No podium, no gavel, just chairs in a circle. About 30 people came. Some sat with arms crossed. Some took notes. Some looked at the floor like they did not want to be seen. I kept it simple. I told the story from the start. The dock, the fake inspector, the vandalism, the 1887 deed, the blank signature lines, the shell company contracts. I did not raise my voice. I did not point fingers at anyone in the room. When I finished, a man near the back stood. He said he was a retired engineer. He asked to see the meter logs. Garrett handed him the notebook. The man flipped through and nodded. These numbers are clean, he said. They match projected use on warm days and cool days. Whoever set this up knows what he is doing. Garrett shrugged. It is just gravity and a pencil. A woman in a red sweater spoke next. My husband is on dialysis, she said. I need to know, in plain words, will our water stop? No, I said. It will not stop. We will sign a fair agreement. Prices will be transparent. Surplus will not go into anyone's pocket. It will go back into the lake and into scholarships for local kids. Silence. Then a man laughed once. Not mean. Surprised. You are telling me you have us cornered, and you're not going to squeeze? I'm telling you I have no interest in becoming the villain in your story. An older man at the front lifted his hand. What about the board? What happens to them? That is your decision, I said. But I will not sign anything with the old leadership. We need a clean start. By the end, people were unclenching. A few even shook my hand. One woman hugged me without asking. When the room emptied, the engineer stayed behind. You should expect someone to try to sabotage those meters, he said. Fear gets messy. Put a tamper seal on them. Thank you, I said. Would you be willing to serve on an interim water committee? He smiled like he had been waiting to be useful. Yes. In the parking lot, I found a note under my truck wiper. For words. Sell now or regret it. I folded it and put it in my pocket. I did not show it to Maya that night. I knew she would worry. I did not want worry to drive our choices. The audit request did what audits do. It made people nervous. The interim board's lawyer argued that the books were private. Maya wrote back with 3 case citations and a deadline. On the 4th day, we received a digital folder. It was a mess. Duplicate invoices, missing approvals, big checks to consultants with P.O. boxes. Maya did not smile often. She smiled then, but only with her eyes. Truth has a shape, she said. People who lie keep changing the outline. People who tell the truth keep showing the same picture. We printed the worst pages and put them in a binder. Not to wave around. To have ready if we needed the judge. Bradley made his move the next evening. We caught him near the tree line on my side of the fence. He had a crowbar and the kind of courage that comes from thinking no one sees you. Garrett stepped out first and said his name. Bradley froze like a deer. Then he tried to run past me. I just raised one hand. You do not want this to get worse, I said. His jaw shifted. The bravado slipped. I'm not going to hurt you, son. But I am done pretending. Your mother put you in the middle. That was wrong. You still have a chance to fix your part. He looked at the ground, then at the crowbar in his hand. He sat down. His voice came out small. She said you were stealing from everyone, he said. She was stealing, I said. The proof is public. Go see it. Do not take my word. He stared at me for a long second, then walked away without the tool. I did not call the deputy. I wanted him to choose better without a record that would follow him forever. The first draft of the water agreement took us a week. We kept it in plain language. The fee covered line maintenance, meter upkeep, and a modest reserve for emergencies. Every quarter, an independent accountant would review the fund and publish a 1-page summary any homeowner could read. No hidden vendors. No cousin contracts. If a major repair was needed, there would be a vote. The last paragraph named the fund. I wrote those words myself. The Clara Thornton Memorial Conservation and Scholarship Fund. There were no flourishes. Just a simple sentence that said what the money would do. We sent the draft to every homeowner with a short letter. It asked for input. It asked for patience. It asked for a vote in 10 days. On day 3, the doorbell rang. A man in a plaid shirt stood on the porch. He introduced himself as one of the oldest residents on the far shore. He had watched my uncle fish from this dock for years. I did not like the HOA much, he said, but I never liked conflict either. Maybe that was my mistake. Your uncle was a quiet man, but he had a spine. I see that in you. He took a folded bill from his pocket. It was a $1. He placed it on the rail. What is that for? I asked. First dollar for the scholarship, he said. Seems right to start small and honest. I will not tell you I did not choke up a little. I did. The vote came quicker than we expected. People have been talking in driveways and over fences. The interim board held an open session at the library again. This time there were more people. Young parents, grandparents, 2 teachers from a school. The engineer brought charts. Garrett brought the meter log. I brought my uncle's notebook, not to show, but to hold. When it was time to vote, hands went up. A few against, many for. The interim chair counted twice, then announced the result. The agreement passed by a wide margin. No cheers, no victory lap, just a sense in the room that a knot had finally eased. Afterward, the engineer walked over and shook my hand. Next, you will need a formal dissolution of the old HOA, he said. Not everyone will like that step, but most are ready. The contracts were the last straw. Maya nodded. We will file next week. There was one more thing I needed to do before we took that step. I drove to the spring house at first light the next day. The old stone door scraped when I pulled it. Inside, cool air. A trickle rimmed the basin. It looked like a small thing. It was not. I sat on the step and opened my uncle's notebook to the last page. He had written one final line in a careful hand. Leave it better. I thought about what better meant. Cleaner water. Honest books. A path for kids who never thought college was for them. A town that did not bow to fear. I took out my pen and wrote under his line. Trying. When I stepped back outside, Garrett was walking up the path with a thermos in his hand. Thought you might be here, he said. The vote went through, I told him. He nodded. I heard. Folks are talking about you like you are some kind of stubborn saint. I'm no saint, I said. Good, he said. Saints make people nervous. Stubborn men build fences that do not fall. We stood shoulder to shoulder for a minute and looked toward the lake. It lay quiet as always. Houses on the far side. Trees along the near bank. A pair of loons breaking the surface and sliding away. Ready for the last part? Garrett asked. What is the last part? You know, the part where you walk into court and ask a judge to end a machine that ran this place for 30 years. I took a breath. Yes, I am ready. Maya called at noon. We file tomorrow, she said. But I need you to understand something. The day we file, you will become the center of the story again. People who like the vote will thank you. People who lost power will say you are a tyrant. Stay steady. I can do that, I said. Good, she said. Because the truth is steady. That is why it wins. That night, I wrote a short letter to the homeowners. Not a speech. Just 4 paragraphs. I thanked them for trusting a stranger. I told them the filing was not about pride. It was about closing a chapter that had never been honest. I promised the water agreement would stand no matter who shouted. Then I added one last line for the older folks who had stopped me in the grocery store with soft hands and worried eyes. No one will lose water on my watch. I signed my name and went to bed early. For the first time in months, I slept like a man who knew the ground under his feet was firm. Morning came clear. I put on a clean shirt and met Maya in front of the courthouse. She held the petition in a plain folder. We did not say much. We did not need to. The clerk stamped the first page. The sound echoed in that small room in a way that told me something had ended and something else had begun. As we walked down the steps, I saw Bradley leaning on a rail across the street. No smirk this time. He raised a hand halfway, then lowered it. I walked over. You want to see the records? I asked. He nodded. I did. I am sorry. That is a good start, I said. Do better next. He He looked like a kid again. For a second, I saw a boy who had wanted to please his mother and had not known how to stop when pleasing meant harm. He turned and left without another word. Maya and I stood by the truck and watched the town go about its life. A school bus rattled by. A man in a feed cap waved and did not know who we were. A woman walked her dog and smiled at everyone. Now we wait, Maya said. What do we do while we wait? I asked. She smiled. We keep telling the truth. I drove home slow. At the mailbox, I found a small padded envelope with no return address. Inside was a second envelope. It held a simple card. For Clara, it read. Inside was a check for $1,000 made out to the fund. No note, no name, just a hand that wanted to help. I walked down to the dock and sat with the card in my pocket. The boards were solid under me now. The word someone had sprayed months ago had long been sanded off. The lake did not care about court filings or contracts. It just kept moving in the only direction it knew. I was not naive. I knew there would be pushback when the petition hit public notice. I knew some would call me greedy even when every L. I was not naive. I knew there would be pushback when the petition hit public notice. I knew some would call me greedy even when every line proved the opposite. I knew there would be another meeting in another room where someone would say I had gone too far. But I also knew this. There are days when you find yourself the keeper of something you did not earn. You can hoard it, or you can build a gate with a clear hinge and an honest lock and give every neighbor the key. I chose the gate, and I chose to put Clara's name on it. The next chapter would be the hardest. Court. Final numbers. The last masks dropping. People who had been quiet would speak. People who had been loud would slip away. I was ready, because this was never about winning an argument. It was about giving a town back to itself. I used to think courtrooms were built for truth. Turns out, they're built for patience. The case to dissolve the Pine Lake Estates HOA was set for a Monday morning. The courthouse was small, one of those older buildings where every floorboard creaks like it remembers better days. Maya and I sat at the front. Behind us, half the community filled the benches. Some nodded at me. Some couldn't meet my eyes. At the far end sat Delilah, back in her blazer, chin high, pretending she wasn't wearing an ankle monitor under her pant leg. The judge entered, quiet but sharp. You could tell she'd seen decades of people who thought they could out-talk the law. Maya began first. She laid it out plain. The 1887 deed, the missing signatures, the shell companies that funneled community money into private accounts. No drama, no raised voice, just documents, dates, facts. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. My hands didn't shake. I looked at the judge, not at Delilah. Your Honor, I said, I didn't come here looking for a fight. I came because I lost my wife and needed a quiet place to start again. Instead, I found neighbors who had been misled and a system built on what wasn't theirs. I'm not here to take anything from them. I just want what's fair and honest. For the first time in months, I saw something in Delilah's face. Not anger, not pride, but fear. The kind that comes when control slips through your hands and you realize there's no one left to blame. Her lawyer tried everything, said the deed was outdated, the documents irrelevant, the water claim unenforceable. Maya didn't flinch. She slid over the county confirmation letter, the engineer's testimony, and the audit showing hundreds of thousands siphoned off through fake maintenance contracts. By noon, the judge had heard enough. The evidence is clear, she said. The Pine Lake Estates Homeowners Association acted beyond its authority, failed to secure valid water rights, and misused community funds. Effective immediately, the HOA is dissolved. Control of Pine Lake's water management will transfer to the newly established Clara Thornton Memorial Conservation Fund under Mr. Rex Thornton's supervision and community oversight. The gavel fell. That single sound felt heavier than anything I'd heard since Clara's passing. Delilah's lawyer whispered something, but she didn't respond. She just sat there, still like someone who finally understood her story had ended. Outside, the air smelled clean after morning rain. Garrett was waiting by the steps, smiling in that quiet way of his. You did it, he said. No, I said, we did it. That afternoon, Maya and I went straight to the spring house. It felt right to go back to where it began. The water was steady as ever, moving through stone carved long before any of us were here. You know, Maya said. Your uncle would have liked how this turned out. I smiled. He'd say I took too long to learn his lesson. What lesson's that? Don't mistake silence for weakness. She nodded. He'd be proud. The next few weeks were full of small, quiet moments that said more than any headline could. A retired teacher dropped by with envelopes full of handwritten letters from her students, thanking the fund for protecting our lake. A single mother from the far side of Pine Lake donated $20 in cash. Her note said it wasn't much, but she wanted to be part of something honest. Even Bradley stopped by one evening. No hoodie this time, just a folded check for $200. My mom used to say the lake was ours, he said. Now I know she was half right. It's everyone's, as long as we take care of it. I didn't say much. I just nodded. Sometimes silence is the kindest answer. Life settled after that. The calls stopped. The letters stopped. Even the gossip quieted. Every few days I'd sit at the edge of the dock, coffee in hand, watching the water ripple. Peace doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in slow, like light through clouds. Garrett came by one morning with his notebook. You realize, he said, you just rewrote the way this whole county thinks about HOAs. I didn't rewrite anything, I said. I just reminded them the law's still older than their bylaws. He laughed at that. You know, you could have made a fortune off this. But you didn't. I already had what I needed, I said. A roof, a dock, and quiet that means something. The fund's first official act came that spring. We gave out 3 scholarships, small ones, to local students studying environmental science. One of them wrote me a letter saying she wanted to work in water conservation one day. I pinned it to the wall of the cabin beside Clara's photo. Sometimes, I imagine what she'd say if she were here. Probably something simple like, you finally listened, because maybe she was right all along. Peace isn't about escaping people. It's about choosing what kind of story you want to leave behind. And mine began the day an HOA called the cops about a dock, and ended with the town learning who really owned the water. The courthouse order felt final, but rebuilding never starts with a stamp. It starts with the first neighbor who decides to show up. 3 days after the ruling, we held an open meeting at the library. No board, no gavel, just a sign-in sheet and chairs. The room filled slowly. Couples who hadn't attended anything in years came early and stayed late. People brought questions, and for once, they wanted answers more than they wanted applause. I opened with something simple. We're not here to replace one kind of control with another. We're here to set rules that don't need a referee. Maya sat beside me. Garrett took notes. The retired engineer, whose name I'd learned was Tom, had a small easel with an old-fashioned chart clipped to it. We kept the agenda short. 1. Interim shoreline guidelines. 2. Meter audit schedule and quarterly report format. 3. Conservation priorities for the first 12 months. 4. Scholarship criteria and selection committee. 5. Volunteers. People waited for a fight that never came. When the worries settled, hands went up. Can we keep our kayaks on the shared strip? Yes. Just label them so the neighbor doesn't paddle off in yours. Do we need permits for small dock repairs? If it's like for like and safe, document it with a photo before and after. File the photos to the shared drive Tom set up. If it's structural, submit a sketch and we'll review together. No fees for paperwork. What about landscaping near the waterline? Native plants. No fertilizer within the buffer zone. We'll provide a simple list for nurseries. There were nods. Then a question from the back, careful and trembling. What happens to those of us who can't afford any new fees? I stood a little straighter. First, the base rate covers basic maintenance only. Second, we'll build a hardship provision. Quiet, respectful, and temporary. No one gets shamed for falling behind. No one loses water. You could feel the room exhale. We drafted the hardship language that same night, line by line. It fit on half a page. The old HOA had run on fear and fines. The new plan ran on 3 words we repeated until they felt familiar. Fair, simple, transparent. When the meeting ended, people didn't rush to the door. They formed small circles. They compared notes. They offered to help. And when the volunteers lined up, we had more names than jobs. I drove home slow, every house light a little less defensive than the week before. The next morning, We walked the shore with a new map Garrett sketched. It wasn't a surveyor's grid. It was a living drawing. Red dots marked eroded corners. Blue swirls marked reed beds. Yellow triangles showed where storm water ran too fast under culverts. "Start here," he said, pointing to the inlet where spring water meets the lake. "A rock vein will slow the current and stop scouring the bank. A community day can set stone and willow cuttings in one afternoon." "Community day," I said. "You make it sound like a picnic." "It should feel like one," he said. "People take care of what they build with their hands." We picked 2 dates, Saturdays, a month apart, to let backs recover and word spread. Tom ordered gravel and riverstone. A local nursery donated native willows and dogwoods. The hardware store knocked 20% off shovels and gloves without being asked. I wrote the check from a new fund and signed it with a pen that didn't shake. The first workday began with 10 people and grew to 30 by noon. We set stones, tamped gravel, tied live stakes in neat rows. A granddad taught a boy how to angle a shovel without tearing his palms. 2 widows who had never met shared a bench and a bag of cookies and traded stories about their husbands' boats. At 3 o'clock, we all stepped back and looked at what we'd done. It wasn't glamorous. It was right. When the second workday came, somebody brought a folding table and made sandwiches. Somebody else showed up with a tub full of ice and lemonade. You could feel a change in how folks spoke to each other. Softer, less guarded, like the lake was teaching us a better tone. Not everyone came around. A small group stayed distant. They liked the old order because it made them feel tall. They wrote letters to the editor about property values and creeping socialism and warned that outsiders were taking over. The editor printed them, then printed our meter numbers beside them. The town read both and shrugged. We did what steady people do. We stayed on schedule. The first quarterly report went out 1 month early because Tom finished early. 1 page as promised. For numbers in bold type: inflow volume, maintenance spend, reserve balance, scholarship pool. Below the numbers, a paragraph in plain English. No outstanding invoices. No contracts outside approved vendors. No anomalies. For the first time since I arrived, my mailbox held more thank you notes than threats. A week later, the auditor's letter confirmed what everyone suspected about the old books. 3 contracts were sham companies. 2 had ties to Delilah's family. 1 was a neighbor's cousin who consulted on projects that never happened. I read the letter twice, then put it away. Not to bury it, to keep it from owning my day. Delilah's sentencing came and went. I didn't attend. I read the summary quietly at my table, then went out to the dock and checked a loose screw. Justice is a door that closes. You don't stand there holding the knob. Bradley stopped by that evening. He asked if he could volunteer at the next workday. He didn't offer excuses. He didn't ask forgiveness with his eyes. He just asked for a job. We gave him the heaviest one. He carried stones until his hands were raw and his shoulders burned. He showed up again the next Saturday and didn't complain. On the 3rd weekend, he stayed after everyone left and gathered the stray gloves and empty cups without being asked. When he finished, he stood awkwardly by my truck. "I didn't know how to stop," he said finally. It felt easier to double down than to admit I was wrong. "We all know that feeling," I said. "What matters is what you do next." He nodded and left. Sometimes the best thing you can give a young man is a hard task and a fair answer. The first scholarship cycle came in late spring. We kept the form short. No 10-page essays or tricks. Just 2 questions. Tell us about a place you loved as a child, and how will you help a place like that as an adult? We asked for a teacher's reference. We asked for a transcript last. 23 applications arrived. We read every one. A girl wrote about watching tadpoles at the edge of Cattle Pond while her mom finished shifts at the diner. A boy wrote about summers on his grandpa's aluminum boat, counting loons like they were stars you could touch. One student wrote about dust and Badwells and a promise to come back as a hydrologist. We awarded 4 scholarships that year instead of 3. The fund could handle it, and our hearts couldn't handle saying no to the 4th. We invited the students and their families to a small ceremony by the inlet we had restored. No ribbon, no speeches longer than a minute. The single mother who had donated $20 stood in back and cried a little when the last name was called. Tom wiped his eyes and pretended it was wind. I sent each student off with the same line. Come back and teach us what you learn. A week later, a county planner asked to meet. She'd heard about the fund and the shoreline work. She wanted to know if we'd share our templates. Every lake around here fights the same two battles, she said. Money and trust. Take anything we wrote and put your name on it, I told her. The only thing I ask is that you keep the reports to one page. She laughed. You just made 4 new friends in our office. Summer settled in. The dock boards warmed under bare feet. The water wore a skin of light in the afternoons. The quiet I had come here searching for finally arrived. It didn't come because the world calmed down. It came because our corner of it decided to behave. We kept the meters. We kept the logs. We kept the habit of checking what we thought we knew. When a dry spell lowered the lake a few inches, no one panicked because the numbers made sense and the plan was already on paper. When a storm hit hard in August, the new rock vein held. The inlet didn't tear another bite out of the bank. People noticed that kind of thing and began to believe in the plain power of maintenance. One afternoon, a couple in their 70s knocked on my door. They had lived here longer than most and had never once attended a meeting. The husband held a photo, sun-faded and soft at the edges. It was my uncle in a flannel shirt, 20 years younger, standing beside the spring house with a fishing pole across his shoulder. We found this in a box, the woman said. We thought you should have it. I took it with both hands. Thank you, I said. He would have pretended he didn't care, but he would have kept it safe. They smiled. The husband looked past me toward the lake. He used to say the water was patient, he said. I didn't understand that then. I do now, I said. The patience of water teaches you the patience of people. We used to answer in seconds. Now we waited a day and answer better. We used to draft rules in outrage. Now we wrote them in pencil and left the eraser on the table. A few months after the scholarships, the high school principal asked if I'd speak at an assembly about the fund and the lake. I don't like microphones. I like straightforward work. But I went, and I kept it brief. Some of you will leave here and never come back. That's fine. Go be large in places that need you. Some of you will stay. That's fine too. Be steady here. And whether you go or stay, learn to read 3 things: the fine print, the waterline, and a neighbor's face. They'll all tell you the truth if you let them. When it was over, a girl handed me a sketch she'd made on notebook paper. It showed the inlet, the rock vein, and a loon almost hidden in the reeds. She'd drawn a small caption in the corner, "Leave it better." I taped it beside my uncle's photograph. We did not forget the ones who opposed us. We just refused to make them our work. A year passes fast when you're busy doing the right kind of things. By fall, even the loudest critics had found other hobbies. A few moved away. A few stayed and quietly followed the same rules they'd mocked. We didn't chase them for apologies. The lake didn't ask for any. It just kept accepting rain. I kept seeing Clara in small corners of my day. A mug she loved. A scarf she forgot on the back of a chair. I used to think memories kept you from moving. Now I know the right ones keep you pointed the right direction. When I wrote the second-year plan for the fund, I left space in a margin for a sentence she might have added. Then I stopped imagining and wrote one I knew she'd approve. Joy counts. Build some on purpose. So we did. We held a late summer picnic at the public launch. Nothing fancy. Potluck dishes. A cooler of water from the spring, steeped with lemon slices. Kids tried to skip stones and learned again that skipping takes patience. Someone brought an old guitar and a voice that sounded like porch light. At dusk, nobody made a speech. We just picked up our plates and promised to do it again. By then, the county had quietly adopted our one-page report format for their own shoreline projects. The planner sent a note that said, "You were right about the page limit." I wrote back, "You were right about calling sooner." The last piece of rebuilding came when we rewrote the covenant language for the streetside commons. The old HOA had used the commons as leverage: mow to this height or pay a fine, paint this color or face a hearing. We replaced pages of shall not with a few lines. Maintain what is yours. Share what is not. Ask before you alter what others use. If you disagree, start by assuming good faith. People laughed when they read it. Then they signed it. Then they behaved like they meant it. On the anniversary of the ruling, I walked to the spring house at first light. The hinges were still stubborn. The stones still held the night's cool. I set the photo of my uncle on the ledge for a minute while I wiped the basin with a cloth and cleared a small leaf that had found a corner. I'm not superstitious, but I like clean edges. When I stepped outside, Garrett was halfway down the path, same thermos in hand. "You keep showing up early," I said. "Maybe I like mornings," he said. Then he looked at the lake and grinned. "Maybe I like proof." Proof of what? That people can change how they live without changing who they are. We stood there and let the day start around us. No speeches, no notes, just two men who had carried a heavy thing from one side of a field to the other and set it down without breaking it. Back at the cabin, an envelope waited in the mailbox. Inside was a single page from the state university. The 4 scholarship students had finished their first terms. All passed. 2 had already filed to volunteer on a watershed project in the spring. One wrote a line that made me sit down before I smiled. "When I test water at the lab, I think about a lake I don't own and still belong to." That was it. That's what rebuilding meant. Protect something until it includes you. Then protect it because it does. We set the calendar for the next year. Fewer meetings, more work days. 2 new scholarship slots, if the numbers allowed. A native plant sale in May with simple tags that said good for birds, good for fish, or just plain pretty. We added a line to the website that said, "If you need help planting, call Tom." We didn't ask Tom first. We knew he'd say yes. That night, I sat at the end of the dock with a pencil and a clean sheet. I wrote a list called Quiet Wins. It wasn't for anyone else. It was for the days ahead when noise might try to come back. No fines in 12 months. No shut-off notices. Erosion down at the inlet. 2 culverts re-angled. 4 scholarships given. 2 students returning to help. 1 county using our template. Neighbors speaking like neighbors. At the bottom, I wrote one more line. Water line steady. I folded the paper and slipped it between the pages of my uncle's notebook. The book felt heavier than when I first opened it. Not with ink, with proof. People will tell you a lake is just a hole that happens to hold water. Maybe they're right, but I've learned something truer. A lake is also a ledger. It remembers who withdrew more than they deposited. It forgives if you fix your balance. We had fixed ours enough to sleep. A year passes faster when peace has work to do. We gotten used to steady weeks, meetings that ended on time, water reports that fit on a single page, neighbors who waved without checking which side of the lake you lived on. Then one morning, Maya called. "There's a proposal," she said. "A developer wants to buy the land north of the inlet. 40 acres. He says he'll build a low-impact resort." The words low impact always mean high damage. I said I'd read the paperwork, though I already knew what my answer would be. When the proposal arrived, I poured a cup of coffee and opened it at the table. It was dressed in polite language. Eco-lodges, job creation, scenic preservation. But between the lines, I saw it clear. More docks, more boats, more stress on the spring that had carried this town long before any of us. I called Maya back. "No," I said. She laughed softly. "I figured, but you'll need to speak at the county hearing." So I did. The hearing drew a crowd. The developer came polished, with slides and a smile. He called the plan a partnership with nature. He said they'd honor the heritage of Pine Lake. When it was my turn, I didn't bring slides. Just a worn notebook. "This lake doesn't need partners," I said. "It needs guardians. We already built what works, a system that takes care of the water and the people. Adding profit to it won't make it stronger. It'll just make it louder." The room was quiet after that. The vote went fast. The proposal failed 6-1. When we left, the developer gave me a handshake that didn't reach his eyes. He'd move on. They always do. By summer, the second group of scholarship students came back to visit. 4 bright faces, full of energy that reminded me what time takes from you. They walked the shoreline, pointing at every plant, naming each by its Latin name like it was a spell. They talked about filtration rates and soil microbiomes, things my uncle never wrote down but somehow practiced his whole life. One of them, her name was Emma, stopped by the spring house before leaving. "Mr. Thornton," she said, "I brought something for you." It was a framed photo. The 4 of them standing by the inlet, smiling, holding small jars of water. She pointed to a small label at the bottom. tested for pH, nitrates, and turbidity, all within perfect range. The lake's healthier than it's been in 20 years. I looked at the photo and then at her. You did that. She shook her head. No, you did. We just took care of your result. After they left, I hung the photo beside Clara's picture. Their smiles looked right beside hers. Fall came early that year. The leaves turned fast and dropped in clumps. Every afternoon, I walked to the dock and watched the reflection shift from green to gold to bare branches. One day, Garrett joined me. You ever think about selling? He asked. Not once. He smiled. Good. Because if you did, the whole town would show up with shovels and build you another cabin before they let this go. I laughed. I'm not going anywhere. You've done something rare here, he said. You've built trust. Not me, I said. We built it. Together. He nodded and didn't argue. That's how you know you're talking to an honest friend. He doesn't need the last word. The fund kept growing in small, quiet ways. A local artist donated prints of the lake and gave half the sales to scholarships. The high school started an environmental club and named it after Clara. Even the town newspaper changed its tone. They stopped running HOA dispute stories and started printing updates about the Pine Lake Restoration Project. One Sunday, I opened the paper and saw a headline that stopped me cold. A year without fines. How one town chose cooperation over control. Underneath was a photo of me, Garrett, and Tom standing by the rock vein, hands in pockets, trying not to look awkward. I laughed out loud. Then I clipped it and taped it beside the sketch the girl had given me. The wall was becoming a quiet museum of what persistence can build. Winter rolled in soft and early. Snow covered the inlet in white silence. The lake looked asleep, but the springs never froze. They whispered under the ice, slow and patient, the way they always had. One evening I sat by the window, notebook open. The fund's second annual report was due. The numbers were steady. No debt, no missing invoices, no noise. I wrote the last paragraph carefully. Pine Lake's health is not measured in dollars, but in clarity of water and of conscience. This community owes its peace not to new rules, but to old values rediscovered. May we continue to leave it better. When I signed my name at the bottom, I felt Clara's voice again. Not words, just warmth. The same feeling I'd had that first night at the dock when everything began. The county later named a small trail after her, the Clara Thornton Path, leading from the library to the inlet. They put a wooden sign at the start. Simple letters burned into cedar. Walk gently. Someone before you love this place. Every time I see it, I stop. Not out of pride, out of gratitude. Because a trail doesn't belong to the one it's named after. It belongs to everyone who keeps walking it. On the first day of spring, I went down to the dock alone. The ice was gone. The water looked clear enough to see the stones beneath. Across the lake, I could hear hammers. New families fixing porches, repainting shutters, getting ready for another season. Life had found its rhythm again. I took my uncle's notebook out, turned to the last page where he'd written "Leave it better," and added one final line beneath it. Done. I closed the book and set it on the rail for a moment, just long enough for the wind to flip through its pages. Then I picked it up, smiled, and walked back toward the cabin. Behind me, the lake was calm. Not silent, alive. That's the kind of peace worth fighting for.